In 1961, President Kennedy called on all Americans to rise to the challenges of the day. He knew that success depended upon the unity of efforts throughout the federal government and the nation. The Greater Boston Federal Executive Board, one of 28 across the country, fosters communication, coordination, and collaboration with federal, state, and local government agencies. This is your federal government, and I am your host, Diane LeBlanc.
Hello everyone. Today we are featuring the United States Department of Agriculture Food and Nutrition Service, which has responsibility for administering 15 nutrition assistance programs. Our guests today are Kurt Mesner, who is the Acting Regional Administrator for the Northeast Region, and Mary Joan McClarney, who is the Acting Branch Chief for School Nutrition Programs. Welcome to the both of you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you for having us.
Kurt, I'm going to start with you. You are the Acting Regional Administrator for the Northeast Region. What is your geographic area of responsibility?
Our region covers all 6 of our New England states and the state of New York.
Okay. And how long have you been with the Food and Nutrition Service?
About 8 years.
All right. You want to tell folks just a little bit more about your background?
So I initially came from a banking background, private sector, and I was with the Department of Housing and Urban Development for 17 years. In fact, when I left there in 2007, I was the Director of Regional Operations for New England. I came to Food and Nutrition Service as the Financial Management Director for the region. And most recently, I was the Deputy Regional Administrator until recently, where I've been acting in this role.
And how long have you been acting?
About 1.5 years.
Okay. And Mary Jo, how about you?
I actually have worked for the Food and Nutrition Service for 5 years, and prior to joining the USDA, I was a school nutrition director in Massachusetts in 2 different locations, Westboro, Massachusetts and Somerville, Massachusetts. Okay. And I joined as a nutritionist, and I worked on a program called the Healthier US School Challenge. And recently I've been acting as the acting branch chief in the schools program. Excellent,
excellent. All right. So Kurt, back to you. Food and Nutrition Service is part of the Department of Agriculture. Tell folks a little bit about the history of the Food and Nutrition Service and its primary mission.
Well, the Food and Nutrition Service actually was formally organized in 1969. However, several of our programs that we administer predate that. During the Depression in the 1930s, the food stamp program, now known as SNAP, came into being. And in 1946, our other large program, the National School Lunch Program, was organized under President Truman. So there's a history on the programs. Our agency goes back to 1969, and it's grown since. We've added additional programs. We're up to 15 programs now on the fight for hunger and obesity.
It's a lot of programs, and certainly you mentioned, you know, really the 2 cornerstones, you know, the old food stamp program, now the SNAP program, and the school lunch program. We're going to talk about those. We're going to try to cover as many of those 15 programs as we can. But before we delve into the programs, so you're in the Northeast region. Where are your offices located?
Our regional office is in Boston, downtown Boston, and we cover all 7 of the states in our region. We have a couple of satellite offices, one in New York City and one in Albany, New York, where there are personnel from our agency that are there for retailer oversight.
Okay. So in terms of your 15 programs, how is the Food and Nutrition Service organized, structured, you know, at a national level and then in each region to administer those 15 programs?
Well, nationally, our agency, although we have one of the largest budgets in the USDA, about $110 billion, in our agency we only have about 1,500 employees. We have a national office in Alexandria, Virginia, and we have 7 regional offices, Boston being one of them. In each region, including our own, we have a staff of about 90 employees and a support staff of an additional 10 or so for IT and fiscal oversight. Within our national office in Alexandria, we also have program offices that deal specifically with policy and oversight. So we work with the national office. We also work locally in the regions with our state partners.
So each of those 7 regions, do they all administer all 15 programs?
They do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not, as you say, a large budget, but not a lot of federal employees assigned to the Food and Nutrition Service. So who are your major partners in delivering these 15 programs?
Our primary partners are really at the state level, the state agencies that administer our programs. We also, with some of our programs, which we're going to talk about, we work directly with some of the food banks that are in the region. We also work with nonprofits, and we are partners with many of the industry partners that are out there in promotion of our programs.
Okay. You know, again, just a few more things to lay the groundwork before we delve into the programs. What are the basic pieces of legislation that govern these 15 programs for either of you?
Well, I can talk a little bit about the National School Lunch Program. The National School Lunch Program was actually signed into law in 1946, and it followed the Great Depression and also the Second World War. And the mission of the National School Lunch Program was to safeguard the health and well-being of the nation's children, and also to support the domestic consumption of nutritious agricultural products. And that's one of our primary programs. And then in 1966, the School Breakfast Program was enacted, and that supports the National School Lunch Program and all the child nutrition meal programs in schools. And then in 2010, we had historic legislation that took place, and it really changed the format of the National School Lunch Program and updated the nutrition standards for the first time in 15 years. And that legislation has really changed the face of child nutrition in a very positive way to help the kids provide more nutritious meals in schools.
So in terms of the legislation, there's been separate legislation focused on the kids. Now, pieces of legislation focused on the general population or seniors, other legislation?
Well, I mean, as with any federal agency, we have a federal appropriations bill that comes out every year, and that is what appropriates the funds and the use of those funds in a very general way. And then we also have a farm bill that comes out every 5 years or so. It runs tandem with the Child Nutrition Reauthorization. And that gets into specifics on regulations on how the money rolls out to the programs, what the intent is.
Okay. So let's talk about the SNAP program. In terms of the programs, is that the largest, or is the...
Yeah, by far it is really our largest program. In terms of dollar amounts, I would say it's 2/3 of our program budget.
Okay.
And it really reaches out to families, which would be parents and children that are eligible.
Okay. And what are the eligibility requirements? Are they the same across the country from one state to another, or do they vary by state? What makes somebody eligible
in the
for
SNAP
this program?
It really is based on income eligibility.
Okay.
Families that are at 130% of the poverty level for that size of their family would be eligible, regardless of the state.
Okay. And if there is a family out there that's struggling, that's not currently receiving this sort of assistance, what do they do?
Well, that particular program, the SNAP program, is typically administered through our state agencies. And they do vary from state to state, the way that states are organized. I would say that if they are interested in finding out more information about participating, they could call our regional office in Boston, and we could put them in direct touch with the agency that they would need to talk to.
Okay. So earlier you referenced it used to be the old food stamp program.
That's correct.
And now it's called something different. What does SNAP stand for?
SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program.
Okay. And there are no more food stamps.
No more food stamps.
How does this program work today?
Today, it's actually, it's been modernized over the years. Today, participants use an EBT card, electronic benefit transfer. And that card, they can transact at any retailer that accepts EBT. We also have now, we have a program where we're promoting farmers markets. And many of the farmers markets in our region now accept SNAP EBT as well. So there are a number of different outlets that participants in the program can go to buy groceries using their EBT card.
Are there restrictions on what somebody can use the card for?
There are. It's used primarily for groceries. So you could not use it to buy tobacco or alcohol. You cannot use it for items that are prepared. You couldn't go to a deli and buy prepared food from a deli. It's primarily for groceries.
So that's very interesting. I know in terms of, you know, doing a little bit of background research for today's show, I mean, really the focus that the Food and Nutrition Service places on not just making sure people aren't hungry, but proper nutrition. So, so if you've got this debit card and a certain amount of money is put on it for your family, whatever your amount is, you go to make purchases, and if you wanted to purchase prepared foods, that's out.
Correct.
Okay.
You cannot purchase hot meals.
And the individuals who have the cards know that, or what would happen if somebody tried to purchase prepared foods?
Well, a couple of things. The participants in the program will know that because when they sign up for the program, they are somewhat trained in that. The retailers that are approved for our program are also aware of that. Okay. So we're going to talk a little more about some of the program integrity measures that we do, but one of the things that we do look for is transactions with the retailers, and if we identify transactions that are for ineligible expenses, then we have a follow-up investigation with that retailer.
And so let's talk about that now. I mean, what does Food and Nutrition Service, the Department of Agriculture, do to, you know, prevent against fraud and abuse, so that there is public confidence in the program?
Well, there is a fairly extensive department dedicated to that. It's our Retailer Operations Division, and what they will do is the retailers that are approved for the program submit documentation monthly on their revenues. They submit information on their inventories. There are a number of different ways that we investigate. We look at the shelf life of their inventory. We look at the transactions. We look at the consistency from month to month of the revenues. And there are actually ways of determining whether we should question if somebody is trafficking. And trafficking is, it would be an arrangement where the retailer may persuade a participant to share using their card, and they will give the participant a portion of the money and they take the rest of the money. That's trafficking, and it's by far one of the largest abuses of the program. But that being said, the program itself runs fairly efficiently. There's less than 1% fraud, waste, and abuse. Okay. The one concern is it's a large program, so 1% of anything that's large is going to be large as well.
Right. So in terms of this program, and in terms of your region, how much money is spent on this program? How many families are serviced? What's the community impact of this program?
Well, here in our region, last year we had over 5 million participants in the 5 billion participants in the program. I'm sorry, 5 million. In Massachusetts, we had just under, we had 887 participants. Wow. Dollar-wise, we had 1.8 billion in participation just in the SNAP program.
That's huge.
So it's a big program.
That's huge. Okay, so that's really one of the cornerstone programs. But the other major programs are really around our nation's children and making sure that they are not hungry and that they are receiving proper nutrition. Mary Jo, you're responsible for, or the acting branch chief for child nutrition programs?
Actually, the school nutrition programs. And that really covers the National School Lunch Program, School Breakfast Program, the After School Snack Program, the Special Milk Program, and Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program. And those are all programs that are offered in the school environment to allow children to access healthy meals and healthy foods.
Okay. So as you've just defined that handful of programs, they each clearly have a name that would focus you in on what they are. lunch, breakfast, snacks. I think some of our viewers might say, why do you need all these separate programs? Why don't we have one program to make sure that our kids are getting the right food? So are they all that unique that we should have different programs?
Well, I think they service different audiences at different times of the day, and not everybody qualifies for all of the programs. So some of the programs are focused at risk, the after-school snacks program, but even the National School Lunch and School Breakfast program is a fairly funded program that provides low-income or children that need access to free meals or reduced-priced meals, but also paid meals. But it provides children at all levels meals to participate, or nutritious meals to participate in the National School Lunch and the School Breakfast program. But one of our big areas of focus is increasing school breakfast program participation, and we would love to see as much participation in that program as we have in the National School Lunch program. We have about 100,000 schools in the country that participate in National School Lunch, and we have about 86,000 that participate in the School Breakfast program. And school breakfast is probably one of the most important meals of the day to get the kids started, to fuel them up, to get them ready to go. And we're looking at different ways to provide those opportunities, from breakfast in the classroom, breakfast after the bell. So we'd love everyone to eat breakfast. Not everyone is participating, and not everyone that goes to school participates in the program. We have fresh fruit and vegetable program, and that also allows children to have the opportunity to have more fresh fruits and vegetables over the course of the school day. And also after-school snack program. For some of these kids, it's absolutely the best and most nutritious meal that a lot of the children get every single day. So we have opportunities at all different times of the day to hopefully get nutritious meals to the kids.
Okay, so you just said so much. I want to come back to the school lunch program.
Sure.
It was the first program focused on the kids? Or
it was the first act. It was in 1946, so that was our major program. We didn't have breakfast program, and it really started after the Great Depression and the Second World War. And the reason that the program started was they found that many young men and women enlisting in the armed services were really malnourished and hadn't had proper meals at school. So President Harry Truman and Congress enacted the National School Lunch Act as a measure of national security, but also to provide nutritious meals to children and have them have the opportunity that all children could have nutritious meals every day.
So how does the school lunch program work? I mean, Kurt indicated at the beginning of our show, your major partner is the states. True in this case?
It absolutely is. So the way that the program works is it's a federally funded program that we reimburse states and local agencies, and also we have the Child and Adult Care Food Program, which offers services too outside of the National School Lunch Program. But they reimburse the states and local agencies that provide the meals, and that's the way the program funding works. So it comes through the federal government to the state and local agencies, and they're reimbursed for all the meals that are served over the course of the day, whether it's school lunch, school breakfast, or after-school snacks.
So a child who is participating in the program, who has been determined to be eligible for the program, is the lunch free, or do they pay something, or does it depend?
It's really determined by a child's income level. So we offer free lunch, reduced price lunch, or paid lunch, and all of those are subsidized, are partially subsidized in one way, or fully subsidized for free lunch by the federal government.
Okay, so how does a child connect to this lunch program?
Well, now children, if they're certified for SNAP, become directly certified and automatically will receive free meals in the National School Lunch Program. If children are not certified through SNAP, they also have the opportunity to fill out an income application. Based on their income level, it determines the amount of aid that they would receive, whether they receive a free meal, reduced price meal, or they would not be eligible and buy a paid meal to participate.
Is this something that you do outreach around, that schools are actually, they're proactive in communicating this information to the children about?
I think the schools do a great job. They really, now they have those applications on the websites. I think a lot of them send applications home to every child at the beginning of the school year, and they really work. I think the schools really understand the importance of feeding children and having nutritious meals, and I think they do a really nice job of outreach and working with parents to make sure that they get on these assistance programs, not only with school meals but also SNAP and our other programs, after school snacks as well.
Okay, so again, if a family is participating in the primary program, the supplemental nutrition, what is SNAP again?
Assistance program.
Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program.
Right, so if their family is already in that program, children are automatically
they're directly certified for free meals.
Directed to
breakfast and lunch.
Okay, all right. So what are the numbers again around the school lunch program in Massachusetts? Do we know how many children are we serving, or in the region?
We serve 100,000. There are 100,000 schools, and we serve 31 million meals per day on a national level. In Massachusetts, I believe it's around 3 million meals a day. And for breakfast, we serve about 1 million meals a day in Massachusetts.
Okay.
But those are all meals, whether they're free and reduced or not.
Yes.
I think for the free and reduced, I think the numbers are more 21 million nationally, and here in Massachusetts, just over 1 million.
Okay, all right. So some pretty big numbers. But now the breakfast program. There's a big disconnect in terms of the numbers, the number of schools that participate, and obviously the number of children being serviced. When did the breakfast program start?
It started in 1966, and currently we have 86,000 schools participate in the breakfast program. We have about 13.5 million, we serve about 13.5 million breakfasts each day, and where you serve 31 million lunches on average each day. So there is a big difference. Part of our challenge in the morning is at school during lunch, the children are at school, they're there, it's part of the school day. What we're really trying to do is build school breakfast into the school day, and I have to say Massachusetts has done a wonderful job. This year they've changed the program to allow breakfast in the classroom to count as educational time, so schools are able to offer meals not only in the cafeteria but also in the classroom, and I think it's made a really significant difference in Massachusetts, and I commend them on that work.
So that's very intriguing, because as I was again thinking through what would the challenges be, you know, how long does it take to eat breakfast? Is it 10 minutes? Is it 15 minutes?
Well,
I mean,
it really depends, and we have grab and go, and there's all different options. But I think the really hard thing is getting the kids into the cafeteria, because there's so little time, and for the parents to get them there. That's why breakfast after the bell, breakfast in the classroom works so well in the breakfast programs. And those are programs we're really encouraging people to participate in. But again, it needs support from the administration, from the school boards and the administrators to allow breakfast to take place in the classroom. And there's the logistical issues to get it there. But every place that we've had breakfast in the classroom, the kids
have
really had wonderful success. It really helps them with learning, with behavior, with their performance in school in general.
So, and again, I was looking at, you know, the statistics. I mean, when kids are not hungry, they're focused, they're able to learn, they do better. So getting kids breakfast makes sense. But I'm still not completely able to wrap my head around breakfast in the classroom. So do I go to the cafeteria, grab it, and bring it to my English class? Or is my English class now a cooking class?
No, well, we have different models. Typically, the breakfast in the classroom is very efficient. They send them up and they're prepackaged and they're distributed to the children in the classroom. Sometimes it's at homeroom, sometimes it's now in Massachusetts, it can be even 15 minutes into the course of a lesson, and the children just eat it. It's a very organized program. We also have different models where they grab and go, so you can actually pick up and bring it to the cafeteria, and it's just really around the administration and if the teachers will let the children bring it to the classroom.
It makes perfect sense. It's kind of, I'm likening it to us getting on a plane. You know, we get on the plane, we walk through, they hand us our little, and we go and we sit down and we do our work, and, you know, we eat our bagel. Interesting. And so that's a model that Massachusetts schools are using.
We're finding that model, as schools move to them, it's preferable for them. It's easier to move the food than it is the children.
Wow.
And, you know, we've talked to teachers and administrators, and once they develop that model and they roll it out, they find that it works very well.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so school breakfast program, school lunch program, we've covered those. Now, what about the snack programs you were talking about?
So we have what's called an after-school snack program, and those are programs that a lot of times in low-income areas, they provide free after-school snacks to children that participate. Also in the Child and Adult Care Food Program, that is a big part of that program, providing the after-school snacks.
So, with that particular program, again, is the major partner the state, or are you dealing directly with community-based organizations like Boys and Girls Clubs and YMCAs and senior centers?
So the state pretty much oversees all of these programs, and they're delivered on a local level, and it can be through the school model. They can have an after-school program, or they can be in child care centers, Boys and Girls Clubs. All of those places can be venues to offer the after-school snack program, and those are distributed by local agencies, and those can be typically private nonprofits or schools or residential child care homes, or any of those institutions are all eligible for those programs.
So, my sense is, I was a federal employee for 37 years. I mean, I know the value of, so many federal programs, but the reality is, there's a perception out there that it's not easy to do business with the federal government. And, doing business with the federal government, there's all kinds of strings attached, or I'm going to go through and do all of this work and I'm still not going to get it. If there's an organization out there and they want to become involved, again, they have to work with the state. Is it an onerous process? Is it something that they can get approved for pretty quickly, this after-school snack program?
So they can go through, typically what we see is they go through a sponsoring agency. So if it's a small program, they might go to a school program, and the school could sponsor that program, and they do the administration and the paperwork and provide the after-school snacks. That's a model that we see a lot. Typically, when they have an after-school snack program, it might be in a residential child care institute or a CACF program, that they would already be there, and so they would have breakfast, lunch, and snacks, so that all of the paperwork would be combined in one area. But there are lots of ways, if you're interested in programs, to look in the local community to find out if anybody is offering those programs. The school lunch program is a great place to start, because typically they can sponsor those smaller programs and take the burden of paperwork away and just provide the kids the services that they need.
Okay. Now, for I guess all of the programs, once you've sort of been established to participate in a program, is it an annual renewal of your application? How does that work?
It is an annual renewal of all the programs, and what you have to do is you have to get local approval and then state approval, and you have to meet, of course, all the requirements of the programs. But typically, like anything, once you establish it,
right,
it's really a matter of just going through the process each year. I think establishing new programs, like anything, takes a little bit of time and work, but once it's established, it's a more seamless process.
And for all of our programs, during the year, we also do program integrity reviews. We work with the states to ensure that the programs are being used the way that they've been legislated, and the funds that are being used to fund them are used appropriately. So there really is a program integrity piece that is really a big part of the work that we do in the regional office in the states as well.
And that's important.
Very important.
That really is important. So Mary Jo, we talked about all of these wonderful programs: school lunch, school breakfast, after school snacks. What do we do for the children when they're not in school?
Well, we have a wonderful summer program, and I'm actually going to turn that over to Kurt, but that's an area that, again, we would really love to see more participation, because we see a huge drop-off. And again, the challenge is at school, the kids come every single day. In the summer program, they don't necessarily have organized or structured programs. We're seeing less and less organized, structured programs in parks and in city recreation areas. So we need to find venues where the children will come every day and we can provide the services. But the summer program is a wonderful program. Again, provides breakfast, lunch, and can even provide snack in the summer. So I'm going to turn it over to Kurt and give you a little more information on that.
Well, I mean, it is another program that we administer through the state. In most cases, it would be the departments of education, much like our school program. We know that there are about 21 million students during the school year that are on free and reduced meals. Last year, there was less than 4 million participants in the summer program. So there's a big gap. And we know a lot of these students or children and teens during the summertime are going without healthy meals. And that's really the whole purpose of this program. So the way that it works is that we work with our industry partners, people like Project Bread here, Share Our Strength. There are a number of organizations that are nonprofit that help promote our programs. And we work with a state agency here to try to develop sites where the children and teens up to 18 years old can come and receive meals. Now, in areas where during the school year there's more than 50% free and reduced meals, those particular areas automatically qualify for universal free summer food.
Wow.
So any child can show up and receive a meal. They don't have to be identified. They don't have to demonstrate that they come from an area of need. They can just show up and receive a meal. And I think the idea is that when you start seeing more than half the population is on free and reduced, it makes more sense to just have an open site like that.
Right.
So the sponsors are approved to run the sites administratively. Our agency works with the state agency to reimburse those meals, and there's also a small amount of overhead costs that we also fund for them.
So when did this program start?
Summer program has been around for,
I want to say in the 90s.
yeah, I think the
I don't know the exact date.
mid-1990s.
Okay.
Yeah.
But again, the numbers.
The numbers
the
have
kids
grown.
that need a lunch, but then in the summertime, they're not taking advantage of this program. You have to wonder, do they know about it? So in terms of locations in Massachusetts, you mentioned that 50% figure, which if they meet that threshold, then you just have an open site and any child who comes can get a free meal. When you define the community area, is it a community, is it a town, is it a city that has to have 50% of the children? Is it a smaller geographic area?
It can be a smaller geographic area. We can, the states do a very good job of identifying districts. It could be a school district within a town. It could be something that is segregated by the census tract. It kind of depends. We have large communities, and within any one community there is a very wide array of different economic factors to look at. So we may have cases where in one community, one particular area, there is an open site with free and universal lunches, and in the same community, other areas might not qualify for that.
So any sense of how many of these sites we have in Massachusetts?
I don't have that specific number.
I don't know.
I know that the number is growing. Last year, I believe we had over 1,000 sites. I don't have the specific number on that, but it was a little over 1,000. We're finding that it's more important to develop sites than sponsors, because the sites are a challenge where they're located.
Sure.
In the more rural areas, it's difficult oftentimes to get the children and teens there. When we find a site, oftentimes the sponsor on one site will say, we'll also take that one over too. If it's nearby and we can handle it, we'll sponsor more than one site at a time. So we have some sponsors that are doing 5 or 10 sites at a time.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, I know, again, in preparing, I looked at my own community of Waltham, and there are actually several locations where children can go and get a free meal during the summertime. So if there is somebody watching, how does somebody learn about where the sites are? What's the best way to get information?
Well, we do have a website. If you were to go to USDA.gov, there is a page there for the summer program. If you were to click open that page, there's a locator map of the United States, and you can either pinpoint on the map or type in an address, and it will show you the nearest sites that are nearby.
If you type in a zip code, it'll take you right there.
And that's what I did for my community. I put the zip code in, but I typed the wrong one first. So it was like, I live in Waltham, and I'm looking at all of these sites in Brockton, and I'm saying, this isn't working properly. And then I'm like, no, my brain wasn't working properly. I had put in the wrong zip code.
But I would just say that particular site is still being developed with new information, only because we had such a late school year this year with snow that the summer program is really kicking off this week.
Okay.
In some communities, it won't kick off till next week. So the information that's being loaded in there in this part of the country is probably a little later than in other parts. If you were in the Midwest or Southwest, they probably started the summer program a couple weeks ago. But that information is growing. There are also a couple of phone numbers. You could call 1-866-3-HUNGRY, H-U-N-G-R-Y, or in Spanish you could dial 1-877-3-HAMBRE, H-A-M-B-R-E.
Now, I'm just thinking there are some organizations that I think summertime, I think children, and they would seem to be natural partners. YMCAs, Boys and Girls Club. Is there a partner? Are all YMCA sites, are all Boys and Girls Clubs sites? And if they're not, why not?
Okay, so there are actually two types of sites. You could have an open site, which we've talked about, if you're in an area that's more than 50% free and reduced school lunch. There are also what we call closed sites, and that might be a particular camp or a daycare or an organization like a YMCA that maybe they have students and teens and children attending for a specific reason.
Right.
We would, in our summer program, provide reimbursable meals for those children and teens that qualify. If it happens to be in an area that's high with free and reduced, then everyone at that site would qualify.
Excellent.
But to your other question, we're reaching out to any site or any sponsor. We've seen sites that are in libraries, firehouses. We have a campaign with Rural Development Housing and with HUD Housing to develop sites within their residential projects where there's a large congregation of families.
So if there is someone out there that has an association with an organization and they're watching this and they're thinking, you know what, we could do this. We could help our community. We could provide meals to the kids. What do they do? How do they connect, and how quickly could they establish themselves as a site?
It's fairly quickly. They would work directly with the state agency who would provide them with the information, the materials, and the training, and then they would set them up on to administer the program at the site.
Again, we've talked about a lot of programs. We know they're all administered through the states, but sometimes state bureaucracies can be difficult. So if they're having difficulty making the right connection and they really want to establish their organization, can they come to your office, to the regional office?
Sure.
Can you help connect them?
We can. They can call our office directly at 617-565-5300. They could come to our office if they choose to. We're on 10 Causeway Street in Boston, right near North Station. And we would be glad to get them off to a good start with the state.
Excellent, excellent. So we've talked a lot about the kids. I want to shift gears and talk about our seniors. Many of them are on fixed income. Many of them, regrettably, make the choice between medication and food. How are we helping them?
There are two programs specifically for our senior citizens. One would be our Senior Farmers Market. That's a program where low-income seniors can qualify for vouchers that they can use at participating farmers markets. The other program is our Commodity Supplemental Food Program. It's a relatively new program, but it allows us to, through the state, to administer prepared meals that are delivered to seniors in communities. And every one of our states now in the Northeast, New England and New York, all participate in that program.
Okay.
And they're operated from the state level, but with the communities, the town halls and the cities.
So in terms of seniors connecting within their communities, most of them do that through their senior center, their council on aging. And this last program you mentioned the commodities
Supplemental program, yeah.
It's like we come up with great
I
names
know.
being in the federal government. Okay, so that, when I process that to me translated into Meals on Wheels.
Similar, very similar.
So is it associated with, I mean, how does it work? Because many communities have the Meals on Wheels program,
Right.
but seniors need to pay something, you know, for that.
Well, in most cases, we work with one of our primary partners is the food banks, and there are several of them in each state. For instance, in Rhode Island, the Community Food Bank, which services the entire state, runs that program. So they distribute the food packages to the seniors. We've seen in other cases where, around the country, where the meals are delivered to a community house in the town or to the town hall itself for distribution. So there are a couple of different models, but the one that seems to really work well is when the food bank is involved, and they have the resources in most cases to do that.
So what's the state agency that oversees that program? Is it the State Department of Elder Affairs? I'm just thinking
in
all
our
of the
region,
senior
it
centers
is, yeah.
out there. Okay, who should they be making a connection with to ensure that they're bringing this benefit to the seniors in their community?
You know, another program that we have is the Child and Adult Care Food Program that also services seniors.
Yeah.
So that's another venue, but that's a more organized and structured program, so people would have to participate, would have to qualify for that program, but that could be set up in local senior centers or local agencies as well.
And all
but
three
back to
would
this,
be...
back to this program.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you? It's the Department of Elder Affairs
It
that
is.
would.
In our region, in all of our states, it would be the Department
Okay.
of Elder Affairs.
Okay, that would make that connection.
And again, if anyone had challenges in being able to get through and they needed information, they certainly could call our office directly.
And is that true of the Senior Farmers Market
It is.
program?
Yeah.
They would oversee that as well. And how long has that program been around?
Actually, that's one of our newest programs. I think it's been around about 5 years.
Yeah,
maybe?
I think that's about right.
Yeah.
Excellent. I mean,
Yeah.
those are really, really great programs. Now,
Yeah.
any numbers around seniors taking advantage of these programs?
I don't have numbers for the senior farmers market. That would be a little difficult to put a handle on, but I can tell you the commodity supplemental food program, where there are prepared meals delivered. I believe that we have authority for up to 1,000 meals.
Okay.
A little more in New York, obviously.
You know, I probably should have asked you this at the beginning of the show, but again, your placement is with the Department of Agriculture, and your programs support talk a little bit about the significance of that placement, and you know, do you actually get food supplies from agricultural locations and distribute those?
We do. Well, the Food Nutrition Service is just that. We're in the business of providing access to food and nutrition for those that are most in need. We have these 15 programs. One of them is USDA Foods. So the Department of Agriculture, as a department, often works with farmers, and when there is surplus food, they will buy it at a discount and make it available either in the communities through the food banks or through other similar outlets. Many of these types of commodities will make it from the food banks to pantries, soup kitchens, other congregate feeding sites in the communities where people would be able to benefit from that. They also sell them at the food bank at a reduced cost too, for anyone that wants to come in.
Interesting. So do you have an emergency program if people are, you know,
We
really in
do.
a tough situation? How does that work?
Well, it's very similar to the USDA Foods, but I should say the USDA Foods is actually a component of our school lunch
It
program.
is. It's part of the National School Lunch Program. So in addition to providing meals for children, we also provide nutritious agricultural products, and those also show up in the National School Lunch and School Breakfast Program. So it's part of the reimbursement that schools get for participating in that program.
And because it's at a discount, it actually helps contain costs for some of the schools too.
So it's even though, I mean, you've got these 15 separate programs, it sounds like they all sort of complement and work together.
Yeah.
You know, one of the other things that struck me when I was reading about the SNAP program, was the component on employment and training. Can you just talk a little bit about that and why that's so important?
Yeah, that is a component of the SNAP program. I think the intent is to, a number of participants in the program are either working but still low income, or they're in between jobs. They're in transition. The employment and training program, we work with the states to develop projects or to help fund existing projects in the communities to try to train and get some of these participants back to employment where their income would take them off the program. This past year we actually did a pilot. It was authorized in the most recent Farm Bill. There were 10 projects nationally, about $200 million. They're 3-year projects. In Vermont, we were very successful in getting one of them approved, and it's for ex-offenders, people that are in transition, that are homeless, runaway children that are now reaching adulthood, and it's targeting a specific population to try to get them back into employment.
Into the workforce. So
it's been very effective. We provide funding through the state up to a certain dollar amount, and then beyond that dollar amount we provide 50% matching, and there's no limitation on the match. Okay. So if there's a program out there in the community that is working, it meets certain basic criteria for addressing SNAP participants, they may in fact be eligible for some matching funds.
Good, that's good information. Now another one of the major programs that I think many people have some general familiarity with is the program to service women, infants, and children, the WIC program. Right. Talk a little bit about that. Sure. Who's eligible for that?
Well, the WIC program really is about addressing the need for new and recent mothers, their infant children, and their children up to 5 years old. We want to ensure that they have access to nutritious food. In the way that the program is designed, currently it's a voucher program. It's moving to EBT. We have several states here in our region that have already moved, and a couple more within the next year or two. But the program allows a young mother or parent to go into a grocery store and to buy certain types of food that are approved for the program. And these are prescribed based on nutrition and health. They have a lot of training and counseling. Part of the program is health directed. So the counseling may focus on breastfeeding options. It may focus on fresh fruits and vegetables. Many of the meal pattern requirements under the new Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act. It really is to promote health. It's a food prescription program.
So when I was, again, reading a little bit about this program, somewhere I read that half of all of the babies born in the United States, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's actually a little more than half of all the babies born in the United States fall under this program.
Okay, and I was also reading some numbers around, yes, this is an expensive program to run, but actually the dollars saved in healthcare costs. That's right. Can you address that?
Well, it's funny you mention that. In the WIC program, for every dollar of benefits, it saves between $2 and $3 in health costs. Those studies have been done in the last couple of years. Similarly, in the SNAP program, for every $5 in the SNAP program, it generates $9 in economic growth. So the programs actually have an economic benefit to them that oftentimes we don't see.
So just elaborate on that a little bit, because sometimes we hear statements like that. We spend this much and we stimulate the economy. How is the economy being stimulated?
Well, for those, we'll take the SNAP program. If you are using your EBT card to buy groceries, that's part of the economy. Somebody grew the produce, they distributed, there was a retailer involved in it. There may be transportation costs to get back and forth there. Right. So there are some costs that are an added benefit for using it. In the WIC program, it's really more measurable in the healthcare itself. They've There have been studies over the years that show that young mothers and children that are on the program are in fact healthier. They can demonstrate a pattern of showing that fewer of these mothers go into long-term chronic conditions that, you know.
Like, I feel like we have covered so much information. It's almost like I wish we were doing.
We could go on forever.
Yeah, well, or yes, but so many good programs to truly, you know, service individuals in need, you know, for a period of time in their life. We've just covered so much. What haven't we talked about that the viewers need to hear?
A couple of quick things. You mentioned our TFAP program. That's Emergency Food Assistance Program. We do have food commodities that are available if needed in the communities when there's a natural disaster. We can use it, we can deploy them to soup kitchens and pantries, to community centers if needed. The other piece of that is during natural disasters, we can temporarily suspend the eligibility for some of our programs like SNAP and offer temporary disability, temporary SNAP benefits for people. We recently did that with Hurricane Sandy in New York. We've done it with a number of different natural disasters, whether they're ice storms or hurricanes or what have you. We had flooding in Vermont a few years ago where we
So the state partners would know that, and then they would communicate that to local entities that were impacted. Is that how that?
Well, our regional office, like most of our regions, we monitor the situation. And if we see that, in the case of Hurricane Sandy, we immediately got the authority from our agency to be able to deploy commodity foods and to suspend the eligibility requirements for the population in our programs. We notified the states. We went out on site. We helped them set it up.
Okay.
We brought in the equipment for them to be able to use EBT cards. So there's a process involved, but it runs fairly quickly.
It can move pretty quickly during an emergency situation.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Anything else?
No, we really appreciate being here.
Thank you so much.
No, well, I have to tell you, this was great. I appreciate you being here, and I think it's a good note to close on.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So I want to thank our guests from the Food and Nutrition Service for joining us today and for helping us to better understand their role in providing access to food and nutrition education to so many of our nation's children and low-income individuals and families. I thank you for watching, and I hope that you will continue to join us as we feature other federal agencies on your federal government.